16-bit Demakes, and OS remakes. All this and more on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
3 operating system upgrades for those who know how to use them.
16-bit Demakes.
And the most influential game in the world.
Again. All this and more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, everyone. We're joined again by Jason. Such was the amount that you and we enjoyed having him on the show before. So welcome back, Jason. And from the ribbit, feeling a bit froggy, Jason.
Just a touch. We deal in the present and the past and the present of the past on the show. Today, my voice is brought to you by Jason 50 years into the future, so bear with me.
And Dave, dare I ask?
I am also ill. I don't know what's up with me. I don't know if it's the dreaded lurgy, but I had a terrible night being sick and I feel absolutely rotten, apart from my mood being brought up by speaking to you, my 2 friends here, which cheers me up.
Wonderful. And for a change, I'm the one that is not ill because I guess school holidays, the toddler isn't bringing back germs, so makes a nice change. Fit and healthy. On the retro front, it's just been a week of tearing down the garage again this week at the mill, moving everything out of the garage into other storage so that we can start to knock it down. And Holly has got a scissor lift and a sledgehammer ready for Wednesday of this week when we are starting to knock down the mezzanine. So expect some really exciting videos on that this week.
How long do you think it'll take you?
Well, we've got the additional storage booked until the end of September. So I would hope that we can get it done in the summer months because it's cold in that garage. Until we get it insulated, it's cold. So we want to get it all done by the end of the summer. Yeah. And it will also feature perhaps the jankiest lift elevator you've ever seen. So look out for that.
Okay. All right.
Dave, what have you been up to?
I have been, apart from being ill, I've been busy doing just lots of just normal stuff and not had any time for any retro this week. It's been a sad week for retro. I've done a little bit of, I've been playing a little bit of a gold box game. I decided to play Champions of Kryn, so I've done a little bit of that, but I haven't touched it for maybe 4 or 5 days now because I just don't have time. It's rubbish being an adult.
I know, it is, isn't it? Jason, tell us you've had some time for retro this week.
Not so much retro tech, retro literature. We've been casting our production of The Comedy of Errors. So if you like your comedy from the late 1500s, that's what I've been immersed in.
Very nice. Very nice.
The theatre.
Is it a modern day setting of the old story, or is it a vintage production?
This production will be set in kind of a late 19th century concept, puffy shirts and waistcoats and stuff like that.
Nice. Well, should we get into this week's story? Because I know we've got some meaty stories this week. Let's go.
Let's do it. 3 OS upgrades for those who know how to use them. The Deathbed Vigil was former Commodore engineer Dave Haney's documentary / behind-the-scenes look at the last days of Commodore as a going concern in 1994. The 2-hour videotape was heartbreaking, funny, occasionally offensive, and in all cases poignant for those of us who lived and breathed Commodore technology for so many years. Now, during this titular vigil, an all-night party / memorial service held by many of the now former Commodore employees, senior engineer Fred Bowen got out his guitar and started improvising some on-topic tunes. At one point he sings, and I'll just recite this today because my normally narrow singing range is further impaired by this cold. I got the chicken lips blues. I got that computer that's got no use, except for those of you who know how to use them. Now, as a hot-headed young Amiga fanatic, I remember bristling a bit at these lyrics the first time I heard them. Mumble grumble, grr, Amigas are good for everyone. And by my 3rd or 4th viewing of the tape that first week I had it, I calmed down a bit, realizing he was just making a wry joke. And now as an older man, I'm a bit better in tune with the different ways people process grief, disappointment, and such things like that. All of that said, I invoke both the wry spirit and the literal meaning of Bowen's offhand lyrics for this story as I cover 3 operating system updates, which indeed are most relevant to those of you who already know how to use them. All 3 of these items submitted by G7VFY, who must have been a late cut from the available crew options in Sci-Fi Trading Company. Neil.
Oh, I was just going to jump in and say that for anyone who hasn't seen the Deathbed Vigil, it is out there on YouTube. It's quite easy to find, and it is worth watching. It's a very nostalgic watch. There's There's the campfire sing-song, like you say. I seem to remember there are some tours of the facilities in the final days when things have been cleared out, but you catch a glimpse of an Amiga 2000 here and a 500 there. It's well worth watching, so go and I'm sure Duncan will put a link in the show notes to that.
Yeah, people raiding chips out of machines and things like that. So first up, Hyperion Entertainment has released Amiga OS 3.2.3. This is a lineal descendant of the Amiga OS, originally developed and sold by Commodore for the 68,000 CPU family Amigas. Hyperion's entire website is a time capsule with links to their aging ports of games like Heretic 2, Quake 2, Gorky 17, and Sin. And they don't really tell us very much about what to expect from this release. A short bulleted list of features is presented. Reaction classes have received numerous updates. Text editor now allows users to define a custom menu with macros. 12 kilobytes of chip RAM is no longer reserved. A new Kickstart 3.2.3 ROM. At least 50 other fixes, including updates to Disk Doctor and HD Toolbox. And I'd love to tell you more about the features, functionality, and the minimum specifications needed for this update if, like me, you have some Commodore or SCOM era Amigas sitting around. But Hyperion hasn't made that information easy to come by. Notably, the Amiga OS link on the Hyperion page that's right next to the Amiga 3.2.3 release news takes you to their page about Amiga OS 4.1. And that's an entirely different operating system for PowerPC-based computers that provides a 68K emulation layer to run old software. I was frankly heartened when I read about the coverage of this release at osnews.com, whose Tom Holverda begins by saying, quote, "I've long lost the ability to keep track of whatever's happening in the Amiga community, and personally, I tend to just focus on tracking Morphos and Eros as best I can," end quote. Morphos and Eros, of course, being two different offshoots of the Amiga OS concept. Neil, do you have a favorite semi-official pseudo-modern Amiga OS variant?
The murky world of Amiga OSs. Eros is one that I have dipped into from time to time. I used to have it running on an old, very low-cost old Dell PC that I ran it on just to see what it was all about. It was fun, but to be honest, I'm using an Amiga for the nostalgia. I'm not, for a minute, trying to do anything productive on it. I'm not really forward-looking on an Amiga. I'm not saying, right, next week I'm going to use it to do this thing, because that's not what it's about anymore. I accept the Amiga's place in history. So there are two things that are important for me with these OS updates. One, is it fully compatible with the old games I want to play and old scene demos as well, without messing about too much? Does it support modern storage solutions without messing about also? Because I just want to drop a big WHD load archive on there, a front end, and play my games and my demos. That really is all I do on my Amiga. Was this the last... no, I think it was the last update from Hyperion that added large disk support, so over 4 gigabyte disk support.
Yeah, I believe that they've solved that problem where you can attach large drives now, yeah.
So that was really welcome, because when they had it fairly new out, I was struggling to get an Amiga that I'd made working with a great big drive on. And then I ordered some of these new ROMs, 3.14 or 3.2, can't remember which one it was, dropped it in, and everything just sprang to life and it worked. So that was really welcome. And I was quite amazed that, anyone is still building improvements and supporting this operating system so many years later. So I do encourage them to do it. It's very welcome that they are making these tweaks and they're doing it. But I don't think we'll see it in the new A1200 Mini anytime soon, given the news that's going around. Dave?
No, I'm the same as you, Neil. For me, the Amiga is a way to do what the Amiga did in its prime, the games in its prime from the end of the 80s into almost the mid 90s. And I know that there's a wide variety of people who use the Amiga. Particularly in North America, the usage is different than it was in the UK, generally speaking. So I know that some people use it for productivity and so on, and that's not me.
You have a North American right here, Dave, if you wanted to.
I'm conscious
have an
of
insight
that
into
because, Jason, you when you got into the Amiga, you didn't get into it in the same way that or did you?
Well, I mean, it was my main computer. It replaced my Commodore 64, so I was using it for games. I was using it to do school papers and things like that. So it wasn't like, oh, he got a video toaster and things like that. Like I was not a video production guy. It was my main computer. I was aware at the time that it was at best the third place, mainstream personal computer at the time, this being 1991. But for me, I think the path was pretty similar.
Fair enough.
Did you have a big box Amiga, Jason?
My sequence went 500, 2000, 3000. I still have the 3000. And
Nice.
then I got a 4000 tower. There's a story there I'll tell on another episode. And I also have an SCOM era 1200. And I have a CD32 as well.
Okay.
All of those I got in the main.
Yeah, that was the question, because it doesn't count if you go back and buy it. Well,
no, yeah, all of those I got in the span between 91 and 96, 97.
so you got into the Amiga as Neil was. You weren't heading out quite at 1991, Neil, but you were within a couple
93,
of years.
94, I was on my way out. Yeah.
I'd love to share the story sometime. I had 900 American dollars, and I knew that I wanted a new machine. And I'd love to share the story of the kind of bake-off I did between the three options at some point.
Yeah, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Fair to say you're an Amiga guy.
Oh, well, for sure. So don't feel bad if, like me, you're unsure which Amiga OS fragment, offshoot, work-alike, or spiritual successor is right for you. For those still on the classic Amiga 68K hardware who have been using Hyperion's 3.1 and 3.2 updates, this one is available for those of you who know how to use them. Second up is FreeDOS, the long-running project to create and maintain a modern MS-DOS-compatible operating system for x86 CPU machines, has been released at version 1.4. This really is an incremental release. It doesn't touch the FreeDOS kernel, so some long-sought features like the ability to run Windows 3.1 in 386 enhanced mode are not in place in this version, but things like the command shell, Xcopy visual file manager, FDisk hard drive manager, and MTCP networking stack have all been improved, among other enhancements. Guys, you have any experience with FreeDOS or other of those kind of third-tier DOSes like DRDOS?
I tend to go for DOS version 7, just out of laziness, because it's fairly light in memory, it's highly compatible, and it supports larger partitions. It's actually, that version of DOS comes with Windows 95 or Windows 98. I typically install Windows 98 second edition on older PCs, even if I've no intention of going into Windows, just because it puts a good version of DOS on there. I know that IBM did do a version of DOS 7, and I'm tempted to find that one day and use it. I don't know why, but I like the idea of IBM DOS rather than MS-DOS, even though I don't think there's any significant difference between them. I did try DRDOS back in the 90s, and I don't remember much other than it seemed fine, I think. And I have tried FreeDOS, but last time I tried FreeDOS, it had compatibility issues, and it wasn't quite a suitable complete replacement for MS-DOS. I'm pleased to see, though, that they've improved that MTCP thing, because MTCP is the way that I use on DOS for getting any files across. MTCP allows you to easily turn the DOS PC into an FTP server, and you can then, on a modern PC, access the entire hard disk. So moving across files becomes really easy and neat without having to do anything physical. And I'm pleased that in Windows 3.1 enhanced modes, it's going to come eventually, I hope. But I hope that eventually FreeDOS is what we use, because there will be advantages doing it. It can be tighter on conventional memory and make things a little bit easier. So yeah, I'd like to use it eventually, but I don't now.
So a couple of years back, while I was trying to organize some of my older machines, I replaced Windows on one of those glorious old Sony Vaio compact laptops with that gorgeous purple aluminum body with FreeDOS, and it was pretty easy and fun. Apparently, your mileage will vary wildly when it comes to device drivers for various ISA cards from the 80s and early 90s, but the community does appear to actively promote success with a wider range of programs and hardware. And there are certainly lots of other ways to explore DOS-era games and applications, DOSBox and the like, but if you're running real DOS on real hardware and want a DOS experience on that modern hardware that is going to get regular maintenance, FreeDOS is definitely one of the best options going. Finally, in this roundup of OS updates, we have an aspirational story from RISC-OS or Open, or RULE, the organization that manages the source code to RISC-OS for classic ARM processors. And it's the classic label they're looking to shed, as they are calling for a moonshot, that's their word, to bring RISC-OS to contemporary 64-bit ARM processor cores. Now, in researching the story, I was pleasantly surprised to learn that RISC-OS can be booted on ARM hardware as recent as a Raspberry Pi 4, including a mode which recreates the look, feel, and software compatibility of an Acorn Archimedes. But the Raspberry Pi 5 and a whole class of other 64-bit only ARM cores are off limits. This will be a big job, as RULE readily admits. Quoting here from their release, quote, The Moonshots initiative represents a fundamental shift, focused, multi-year development projects undertaken by full-time engineers. The first Moonshot aims to make the RISC-OS source code portable and compatible with 64-bit ARM platforms, a prerequisite for future hardware support. Rule has already scoped the work, identified key milestones, and built cost models based on realistic employment and project management needs, unquote. They go on to say they're looking for funding partners, experienced embedded software engineers, and community advocates to participate in this multi-year project. And it's notable that the RISC-OS community has already pushed past some architectural limits in the past, including that of what they call 26-bit mode, just to get it as modern as it is today. Now, I've never been able to visit the Archimedes/RISC-OS branch of the tech tree, but it is interesting to see that just as the ARM has become an outsized success, its original operating system is faring better today than most GUI operating systems of the 80s and 90s.
Have you seen how much they're trying to raise for this moonshot?
It's quite a bit.
Yeah, it's 2.5 million. 2.5 million pounds. I appreciate that there's a lot of work involved and they may need to raise bounties to get certain parts of it done. And I was reading that it is a complete rewrite from the original assembly code that this whole thing is built on to achieve it. But 2.5 million, that's a big ask, Dave.
Well, what I suggest they do is they should make a digital support bundle.
What would be in it? What would be in it?
Zarch, yeah. Although in brackets they can put virus after it so that people know what it really is. Archimedes Elite. That would be worth 2.5 million in itself.
Yeah.
I've got a blind spot with RISC. I know very little about it, other than it seemed to be failing in the 90s. It didn't quite catch on, and now looking like it's won. It's defeated everything else around. It's beating x86, and it's the Mac. I think a Mac Mac uses ARM. Does that mean a Mac uses RISC?
I mean, it traces back to that original RISC CPU. Yeah.
ARM has a reduced instruction set, so it is a RISC CPU. Yeah.
So, of course, all our mobile phones are that way as well. But when I think back to the 90s, we had the 68K, we had the x86, and then we had these Archimedes in schools that didn't really catch on. And it just seems weird to me that's the one that's ended up bubbling away on a back burner for all these years, and then all of a sudden, it's the one that seems now to be the best one around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ARM's comeback is nothing short of amazing, considering that the first few global products it was built into failed spectacularly. Possibly the biggest turnaround in recent tech history. Apple and AMD would have a case, but ARM is definitely in that conversation.
Yeah. Might have been sensible for the UK to keep hold of that.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I mean, I've always got, and I think you have as well, Neil, I think we've both said this, I would want Archimedes to win against Atari and Commodore and all the rest because it's British and have a British micro beat them. But it wasn't even feasible for me to get an Archimedes for Christmas instead.
It was Intel. That was their competition. Intel was just absolutely slapping anything to do with RISC down, saying, no, it's slow. It's all about the megahertz. It's all about the headline number. When actually, long term, it's proven that ARM had really something good going for it. There we go. Anyway, sorry, Jason, we're derailing your story here.
So I still have my VHS copy, but these days, like Neil said, you can watch the Deathbed Vigil for yourself in all its 90s videotape glory on YouTube. And all my best to those of you who really know how to use these operating systems.
We are sponsored this week by PCBWay. Thank you very much, PCBWay for sponsoring us. Who are PCBWay, Jason?
They are an outfit that can make almost any PCB you can imagine, if you know how to use them.
Not just PCBs, they can do CNC and 3D printing. They can do PCB assembly, PCB design, OEM, product capabilities, why us, feedback, shared. Oh, I'm just reading the menu bar on the website now. PCBway.com.
They can put the bird seed on your PCBs for you, the tiny little things that blow away. They can pre-populate that for you. And of course, we always like to talk about their shared library, their unique selling point. Go and have a browse through it. Thank you very much, PCBWay, for sponsoring us this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So off the back of Jason's 3 complimentary stories, I've picked 2 as well. We're getting a lot of stories in today. And mine are on the topic of video game demakes. This is thanks to listeners Squirrel-Excellent and Good Punk 2 for these stories. The first is our old friend Indiana Jones. So for some, there it is. For some, the pinnacle of LucasArts point-and-click adventure games, maybe even the whole point-and-click genre. We had The Last Crusade, then we had The Fate of Atlantis. We are going to pretend the action games don't exist. And the point-and-click games really put us into Indie's shoes. And they convey the film's action and also the humour of the films, as well as the humour of LucasArts as a studio perfectly. We saw a brand new indie game last year, The Great Circle. Very well received it's been too, and reviewed. I think it's a fantastic game. And a YouTube channel called 64 Bits presents us this week with a demake of that game. So it's The Great Circle in the style of a 1992-ish LucasArts game. And I dare say some of the assets have been borrowed or enhanced to get this authentic look, especially the indie sprite. That looked really familiar the way he was standing. The style of this combines a VGA PC-like game of the era with a few additional flourishes that I dare say would have pushed a 386 back in the day. Every now and then you get a big animation of maybe a smoke cloud or things shooting through windows that you think, I don't think my 386 would have coped with that, but it looks fantastic and it's all in the right style and all in keeping. Now, this is an animation. It's not an actual game. Do watch it. Don't let that put you off. But 64-Bits say they are working on a real playable Game Boy game now, and they say that's available right now for playtesting on their Patreon. I can't find any screens of how this looks. I'm sure it's not this one. How do you get this on a Game Boy, even a Game Boy Advance? I don't think you can do this. So that must be an entirely different thing. Either way, it's a great reminder of a genre that we all love. And then the next demake is fully playable, it's complete, and it's available now to buy on cartridge. It is, that's right, Farming Simulator. It's been ported to the Sega Mega Drive. Now, this story is on time extension. Yes, Dave?
Can I request that you do the rest of this in your farmer accent?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not good at accents. Here,
It's your accent, though.
This story here is on time extension report. They report that there's a limited edition cartridge available from Strictly Limited Games, priced at £44 or £62 for a deluxe edition. This isn't just a quickly cobbled together gimmick. It is a lovely isometric game, which reminds me a little bit of Transport Tycoon in its presentation. It's got music by none other than Chris Hulsbeck, and it involves as much ploughing, sowing, and harvesting as you could ever wish to get on a Mega Drive. If you don't believe me, just look at the trailer. Now, the thing that made me pick these stories this week is not just that they exist. It's wonderful that they do. But they're both so well done in their own ways. They don't make me think when I look at them, oh, that's a fun throwback. They actually make me want to play them and properly play them. And they remind us that retro has become such an accepted and integral part of gaming as a whole that you don't need to look at these through rose-tinted specs or even have existed in 16-bit times, just as we learned a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the percentage of Switch owners who play retro games but weren't alive when those games were released. It's a popular thing. So, is it retro? Is it just a scene? Is it a style of gaming? How mainstream could this stuff ever hope to get? Or are we, in this podcast, so immersed in our own worlds that we give it more credit than it's due? Or do we just put it on a pedestal a bit too much? I don't know. Jason, what do you make of these games? Were you an indie fan? And can you think of anything that's ripe for a demake in 2025?
Yeah, I need to go back and honestly spend more time with the indie adventure games. There was kind of that dark period where if it wasn't on the Amiga or wasn't readily available for me, I wasn't playing it and didn't go back and catch up. But I am familiar with how those Scum games from LucasArts evolved, and the mock-up, it's definitely on brand. And as you say, it is a mock-up. These are animations, but there's nothing going on that couldn't be a real game. The fact that that Game Boy is the target is a little odd after this being the pitch, because that's not really a Scum target and suggests that another format entirely is what they have in mind. And very cool that Farming Simulator release is official, just as their earlier Commodore 64 version was. The choice of Mega Drive was interesting. Like, what is the most recent product you can buy that has a functioning Mega Drive-y, Genesis-y cartridge port? It's a lot easier to understand people making Atari 2600 titles today because there are now mass market products you can buy in a store waiting to receive a 2600 cartridge edge. I'm not sure, they know that the image will spread far and wide before long, but I'm not sure where you'd plug it in.
I think when it comes to cartridges with these things, that's like the Rolls-Royce way to play it on original hardware, and they put that on a pedestal and they celebrate it. And then you go and have a look at it, and you might say, well, I haven't got one, but the ROM's for sale, so I'll buy the ROM and play it through emulation, or, through my little handheld device or whatever I'm emulating on. So it's a nice way of marketing a thing, but ultimately they must sell more digital versions than physical, surely.
Yeah, and if we're taking requests for demakes, I'd be interested to see one of the latter-day Elder Scrolls titles demade back into the format of alternate reality, which was its 8-bit spiritual ancestor.
Nice.
For demakes in general, I don't tend to pay too much attention to them. They often seem to be kind of a proof of concept, a kind of a coding feat, a challenge for someone to do. But this has got me thinking about things again. In general, I'm happiest playing a game on the system that it belongs on. I don't want to see games ported to my favourite system when I can play it on the system they belong on. Happy to do that, particularly arcade games. My favourite way to play an arcade game is on the MiSTer or MAME rather than a port onto a micro. But I wonder if there is room for modern games that have become too time-consuming, too deep, and too big to be demade to 16-bit platforms.
That's the important thing that you've just thrown in there,
Yes.
16-bit platforms, because there are plenty of mobile games of bigger games that come out, but that's a different style altogether.
And you get Steam is full of indie-style pixel art indie games and so on. Okay, that's fine. And there's lots of 8-bit stuff around, but 16-bit platforms is more interesting because one of the things that I remember when we moved from 8-bit to 16-bit, when we moved to that, is the ability to do a lot more with the games. There's a lot of depth you can still do in a 16-bit game. So maybe there is room for games to be demade to 16-bit platforms where they can find the right balance so that a game doesn't have to be your hobby for the next few years to come. There's certainly lots of games out there that seem to be aimed to be the game that you play, the only game that you really play, and you put hundreds of hours into it. And I would much rather put 20 hours into a game and feel like I've got everything out of it by that point. And that's where a 16-bit game might be better.
You mentioned you'd like to play games on the platform that they should be on. What would you say those LucasArts games are the platform they should be on? Because Indiana Jones, for example, The Last Crusade, it did come out on the Amiga, it did come out on the PC, and then Fate of Atlantis did. Yeah.
They were PC games and they got ports to other platforms. I feel the PC is the best place for them.
Yeah. Well, not IBM PC Junior. If you want to go back to, that's Sierra. If you want to go back to Sierra's roots, it's difficult, isn't it? I agree with you. I think Last Crusade, perfectly acceptable on the Amiga, perfectly playable. Yeah. Fate of Atlantis, disc swapping hell. I can't believe they even bought it out on the Amiga. And you get into 256 colours, which made all the difference on those scum games. Yeah,
but I mean, certainly an argument to play Simon the Sorcerer on the Amiga, or Lure of the Temptress, or
Beneath
the other one I forgot about. That's the one I was.
Is that what you were thinking
about.
Of? Okay.
Yes, I think they've got an Amiga legacy, and I think they've got an Amiga history to them. I would probably choose to do it on the PC just out of ease, but there's nothing wrong with playing it that way. But I mean, for me to play Monkey Island on my Atari ST, I can play Monkey Island on Atari ST. I wouldn't choose to.
See, I think of that as an Amiga game. I think of Monkey Island as an Amiga game all day long. Do you not?
It isn't, though. It's a PC game to me, but yeah, it's the same. Frontier 2 is an Amiga game. Elite 2 Frontier is an Amiga game, but I would choose to play it in PC because that's where I played it first.
Jason, Monkey Island?
Monkey Island, yeah, I'll go Amiga on that, and I'll certainly. We know that Frontier is the ultimate Amiga tech demo. Although it's intriguing to me that the version I believe that's been ported and cleaned up is the ST version for whatever reason.
Dave, you fight like a dairy farmer. Thank you again to Excellent. Was it Excellent? No, Squirrel Excellent and Good Punk 2 for submitting those stories. Really interesting reads, and do go and check out the links to see them. Even if you're not going to buy the cartridge of Farming Simulator, just go and watch the trailer. I said it again. Watch the video for it and see what you make of it. And you can find that, as well as all other links, at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. And don't forget to submit your own stories if you see them. And one last thing, Dave, that time extension story that we quoted there today, it wasn't a story by Damien McFarlane. It was someone else. It was someone else.
I did notice they were back, though.
Yeah.
I hope Damien's okay.
I have checked in Moby Games, and 1990 was the year that Monkey Island came out on PC and also on the Amiga. So I had this idea it was ported later to other systems, and maybe it was, but on release you could have got it on the Amiga by the looks of things. So Amiga, I guess, is just as viable.
Let's go into the housekeeping. Let's go into the housekeeping.
There are lots and lots of thoughtful comments about influential games that clearly got people thinking. Thank you for all of your comments. Loads of constructive ones as well. Nobody really coming in with a two-footed tackle saying, you're all talking rubbish. Apart from Aaron from Amigos, who
what did he say?
He thinks Shenmue might be the best, most influential game of all time. He didn't really say that, but you can argue he did. I think Shenmue isn't the most influential game of all time, but that doesn't mean it doesn't belong in that list. I don't want people to think I think it doesn't belong there. But huge discussions on the Discord about it. Really thought-provoking stuff there. So thank you for all your comments.
Yeah, and some good discussion on the Discord about how bad games can be influential as well as good games. Influence is influence, and lessons are learned from them. Duncan, put a link to the Discord as well. Listeners can come and chat with us as well about these things. Carry on, Dave.
I'd like to welcome a new patron, Carol. Thank you very much, Carol, for signing up.
Thank you.
If you'd like to sign up to become a patron, where would you go, Jason?
You'd go to patreon.com and you'd search for This Week in Retro.
Oh,
or you could give the direct URL, which I'd read out if I had it in front of me.
Patreon.com/ This Week in Retro.
Love it.
www. Gareth Q, who is the guy that does the wonderful covers for Pixel Addict, he said I was right last week when I guessed that the chiptune story, what we covered last week, actually did come out in 2018. He says, looking at that YouTube channel, I am not sure they have permission to have it there, so it might drop soonish. I watch it on Prime, so it might still be there. And he showed me a DVD keep case that he has, or Blu-ray, it looks like Blu-ray's in it, with the Commodore story and the chiptune story with the same kind of design. So it looks as if that was a double documentary that was made in 2018. You may have noticed that Jason is back.
Hello, Jason.
And he's back very quickly after his last visit. We are thinking quite seriously about bringing Jason in as our third host. We said that when Chris stepped back, that we would not rush into it and we'd wait and see what happened. But we think it might be Jason. And of course, Jason is trying out to make sure he can fit it in, make sure he enjoys it, to make sure it works for everybody. So you'll probably see Jason coming in again in a few weeks' time and maybe more regularly. We'll see more. And there will be an announcement next week. Things are changing at This Week in Retro. They're not quite established what that's going to be, but I've got an announcement for you next week, I think. Neil, a big announcement, yeah?
Yeah, don't fear the change, people. Don't fear the change. This Week in Retro, like the Amiga, will never die.
Some bad news to start with. The RCM, the Retro Computer Museum, has been broken into by thieves. They've not said what was stolen, if anything was or not, so thank you for Paul, a.k.a. Hermsky, for letting us know.
Oh, that's off the back of a recent flooding incident as well, isn't it? So they're not having a good time there. Best of luck to all of them there.
So it says, important information, 12th of April. Over last night, the Retro Computer Museum was broken into. Due to this, we have delay opening our main room and shop on the 12th of April. So I'm not sure if anything was stolen, but if you are offered a job lot from someone who doesn't know what they're doing, then be suspicious.
And Compute's Gazette magazine, that's for the Commodore 64, returns to print and digital after 35 years. Thanks to Indigo Prime for letting us know. You can find more info on their website, which really is computesgazette.com.
Following up from last week's 8-bit chiptunes, SDMat22 has linked us to a dual SID rendition of Van Halen's Jump, and it sounds far better than it has any right to. So go and check out the link to that.
Christ of Why Do You has let us know that over 1,000 classic PC games are going cheap on GOG just now. It ends around the 25th of April, and he's linked a Kotaku article with some suggestions on what to buy, although I will say, don't do what I'm terrible for. Don't buy games because they're a bargain and then never get around to playing them. But yeah, if you fancy playing a DOS game, big list there to go to.
Just to jump in there on GOG, we did get an email from John Knight, who said, he asked, did you get the GOG survey in your inbox? Which I didn't. And he said they're asking users what they think about GOG starting a gaming membership service and asking what they think of services like GeForce Now, EA Play, etc. The questions include things like, how interested would you be in supporting GOG's mission beyond purchasing games? Do you recognize perks like Hall of Fames, VIP badges, extra features, things like this? So there's this great big questionnaire they're asking people that is leaning towards a GOG membership service. Make of that what you will, but I think we should probably keep an eye out on that. Be careful, GOG. Tread carefully.
I can see how I would not want that to happen. However, if they're going to use it as a way of preservation and curation, then maybe. But I hope it's not just a give us $5.99 a month and we'll give you access to whatever you want.
Yeah, who would want to be in the subscription business? Patreon.com.
Yeah.
Dr. Local links us to a video of VCF East, which has just happened. It's a 10-minute, well-edited walk around from The Verge. Do we know if he's a medical doctor or is it more of a PhD kind of thing?
Dr. Local. He is a local doctor, and I'm sure he uses Doctor Who as his avatar, Tom Baker. Tom Baker!
Let's bring the tone down. Testicle Entropy has a post called Retro Magazines that starts sad but ends nicely. He says, hi guys, a few years ago I gave someone a place to stay as he was suddenly homeless. He repaid me by stealing all of my retro tech and paraphernalia. All my magazines, old joysticks, tape decks, disc drives, my childhood MSX, Oric 1, C64, all my old consoles, etc. I basically had my own retro cave in the loft. My dad passed during COVID lockdown and it made me resolve to try and track stuff down, or at least a replacement. I came across a website which is trying to preserve all of those magazines from your childhood. They have most copies of Superplay with Will Overton's awesome artwork. Anyway, here it is. So there's a link there to check it out. The Out of Print Archive is what it's called. And he says they're doing sterling work and they're doing it purely out of passion. They don't even accept donations, much as I've tried. So head over and see if your favorite retro magazines are there. So that's worth, a sad story. What is it with theft this week? No more theft of retro tech, please. But it's led to him finding this outofprintarchive.com website. So go and check it out.
There is loads more on the subreddit. Anytime you've got time for maybe you're having a crafty log, have a look, see if there's something that piques your interest, or submit your own articles to it. Last week, we had some good fun with a BAFTA list of the most influential games in the world of all time. Top of the list was Shenmue, and I think the three of us last week were all in agreement that it is not the most influential game in the world, although lots of people, I was really surprised by how many people came up to bat for it to say that it is a great game, it is influential, and I don't think I could argue against a game being influential unless it was a 2025 game. So I have to take the word for it.
And don't forget, you can play Outrun within the game Shenmue. So there is a very influential game in there.
Yeah. What might that game actually be, though? What might be the most influential game? Well, here is a contender, a real serious one for it. And it is GTA, Grand Theft Auto. There's a story linked by Pajako on it, and the story doesn't say it's the most influential game, but I thought it was a nice lead into it from last ones. But I thought I'd lay out the credentials for this franchise's bid to be the most influential game. And I'm not saying it is. I don't know what the most influential game is. I'm not saying what it is, but I would suggest that this should be up there in consideration. First of all, in terms of sales, in the 20 years from 1999 to 2019, it was in the top 10 games of 14 of those years. The original game came out in 1997. I don't know why the article doesn't say how it did. Maybe it was a slow burner. I don't know. But Vice City, San Andreas, and GTA 5 were each number one for one of those years. GTA 5 is the second best-selling video game of all time. That's gargantuan sales. 28 years of enormous sales, and I'm sure GTA will do big numbers when it comes out.
I'd be interested to see the original GTA numbers if anyone's got them, because it did well enough to then have GTA 2, Grand Theft Auto London, and perhaps, I don't know if there were other spin-offs, but it obviously did well enough for them to put the money into that. Yeah,
it was such a different market. Like I wonder if you could even compare them.
Yeah, its legacy has you doing bad stuff for fun, although in a satirical way. I did, however, read a review of it this morning, a review of the original GTA, which gave it 0, because it was peril clutching about how bad it was. So I think whoever that reviewer was has been proven wrong. It's an open world, though, like Shenmue or like Ultima.
Yay!
The legacy from this game is massive, though. So many games are clearly inspired by GTA. So I'm not going to say this is the most influential game ever, but I can't say that it's not. I'm saying, obviously, it belongs on the list, but it could be a contender for top spot. But onto the article itself, and it's titled, How a Chaotic Gang of British Geeks Launched One of the Most Lucrative Gaming Franchises of All Time. Well, actually, it says, How Chaotic Gang of British Geeks Launched One of Most Lucrative Gaming Franchises of All Time. I don't know why they've missed those two words out. Maybe this is a thing where your brain will add them automatically and they can get a shorter headline. I don't know. I would say a little pinch of salt there. I don't think a chaotic gang of British geeks, I think there was something like 85 people credited on the release of this. So it's a huge team did it. So this isn't quite as going back to Lemmings for DMA when they were a much smaller team. But it's based on an interview with Keith Hamilton, the lead programmer for GTA, although I'd say probably the most important part of the game is the graphics engine, which Mike Daly did. And that's because he listens to the show. The original GTA is a top-down driving game that on first glance looks quite different to how the series has ended up. But if you ask me, it has most of the elements already in there. You can drive about, you can leave your car, you do missions, you run people over, you shoot them. It's got a neat thing where the faster you go, it'll zoom out. It's got cool music. It's got a variety of car. It's got police chases, wanted levels, money as score, etc. So all those things have been consistent throughout the series. Of course, the biggest change was when it went from top down to third person in 2001 with GTA 3. But the core gameplay didn't change when the perspective did. But all through the franchise, I think it's been incremental changes, filling in where it was poppy with players doing more, developing more in there. But what strikes me with it, though, is how much the franchise exemplifies the rise of gaming. It came out in time to be a big deal when gaming was a big deal in 1997, but nothing like the level that it is now. I mean, who would have thought in 1997 that this game would end up with hundreds of millions of revenue? I guess it must have billions of revenue now, because it sold, I think, 450 million. That it would be on billboards, that it would be front page news, apart from the usual pearl clutching about, terrible games. And of course, the same applies to developers. In 1997, DMA had grown in size thanks to games like Lemmings, and they were already a big studio, but they're enormous now, just like gaming has become. What do you think, Neil?
Well, Rockstar North, not DMA anymore, but Rockstar, yeah.
DMA.
Yeah, GTA was kind of retro when it came out. I seem to remember thinking this when I first played it. I absolutely loved the game, but it did kind of feel retro because put yourself in 1997. It's all about 3D. Yeah. Duke Nukem 3D came out the year before. You got first-person shooters. Driving games like Gran Turismo came out in 97, Carmageddon, GoldenEye, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, Blood, Need for Speed 2, all 1997 games. So that's what was going on in gaming. And then along comes this top-down game. And yes, I know it's technically a 3D engine, but it was presented as a top-down 2D style game. And it showed you that freedom, fun, and sandbox gaming could be brilliant. It didn't need to be first person. And then just to make it even better, they did release a 3D effects patch to kind of smooth everything out, bring the resolution up a bit and make it even nicer. It just worked, didn't it? And I think that's what GTA did so well. Put the game first, and it did the technology well, but it did it at its own pace. It didn't try to make a third-person game from the start. It would have fallen down if it tried to do it that early. It wouldn't have felt like such a richly filled world if we were in third person in 97, as it did later in 2001 with GTA 3. Did it influence other games? I'm not so sure at that stage. It was really GTA 3 that exploded by combining all of the fun mechanics of GTA that they'd figured out over GTA 1 and 2 with a new perspective. So October 2001, that happened. And from that point on, I think I think you could have predicted a great big franchise would have come out of it. But absolutely not with the earlier games. I don't think you would have looked at GTA 1 and thought, this is huge fun. And then you'd play Carmageddon. You know, Carmageddon is the one you'd look at and say, these are the graphics of the future. This is what a game's going to be like. You wouldn't have looked at GTA 1 and said, this is the future. If anything, it was slightly backwards looking. I always compared it to a game called Speed Rumbler in the arcades, an 80s arcade game. Top down, get in and out of the car, not open world, but similar kind of mechanic. So it already felt retro when I first played it. I wasn't looking ahead with GTA. Go on.
So I think Mike Daly will be in tears hearing you say that.
Well, no, it influenced GTA 3. You know, it did all the hard work. It did all the mechanics for the one that exploded. But
we were speaking to Mike Daly last week before we recorded, and we told him we'd do something to upset him, and then we didn't actually get around to doing that.
But you think about it, you know, GTA 1, you were going up to phone booths, you were getting missions, you were carjacking, you were doing everything that you do in GTA 3.
Yeah. I think people think that there was a huge change. There was a huge change in GTA 3. I think people think there was more of a change than there really was. The core gameplay was consistent throughout. Jason, what do you think?
Well, GTA 2 was my gateway drug to the series, if you will. Like, I was aware of the original when it came out, but 2 was the first one that I played. And yeah, like, I think it's a triumph of gameplay over, you know, kind of maybe trying to race the trend of the first person at that point, where it was, you know, just tremendous mechanics. Even to my mind, a really good cinematic intro might be the first good cinematic intro I remember in a game, like going like, yes, I'm on board. You've done a great job with FMV to set me up for this game. This article struck me when I read it. It's at this point I feel like talking about DMA/Rockstar being this amazing studio. It's kind of like doing a retrospective on, you know, let's say Francis Ford Coppola, that points out that he's a great director. Like, there's no harm in reminding people that these are among the best artists they've ever been in their chosen field. But at this point, I think Rockstar have had their flowers. I wanted to see more about how they've held together the ability to innovate and excel at gameplay while the teams have just exploded in size to make games like GTA 5 and 6 work. And notably, I'm sure some of this has to do with confidentiality contracts and so forth. But remember, the primary source in this story was the programmer on GTA 1 and 2. We're not really even getting the behind the scenes look at how even 3, even that game released almost a quarter century ago, was put together. So those stories, I guess, remain to be told. But I guess absolutely we can take it as read at this point. DMA/Rockstar, one of the best studios there's been.
I think you touched on something really important there in terms of influence. The sheer size of the teams that Rockstar North are dealing with, the methods that they must have come up with to design video games with teams of that size must have had an influence, must have made waves within the industry. Dave,
and we saw a struggle when British 8-bit developers failed to move to 16-bit successfully, and the studio shut down. And then again, they failed to move to console, and the studio shut down, as they had these problems with expanding and developing teams and still being able to get an original vision out to the game when you went from having 3 or 4 people working a game to 30 or 40 to 300 and 400. And Rockstar are the ones that did it, because they were there making Amiga games like Blood Money and so on, and they still managed to get all the way to this. So they're the ones that made it through, while other companies failed to make the transition. The article is in the show notes, so give it a read if you want to find out more about GTA and Rockstar North, or DME as they were at the time.
Time now for our community question of the week, and Dave is cackling, so he's seen something there in the answers. And Duncan was given the power to set the question of the week, wasn't he? And he says, I've been given the power and I'm going to use it. He says, my question is, don't you think, I haven't read this yet, so I'm reading this out live. He says, don't you think that by now Neil and Dave would have learned to finalize the question of the week before they start recording? This week is no different. Failing that, can we go with this one? He says, we've talked about the most influential games of all time today, and I'm sure we've asked you before for your thoughts on this topic. So let's flip it. What's the least influential game of all time? What game has made so little difference to the gaming industry, introduced so little, was so unoriginal that it's noteworthy for that very fact? Yes, I remember that last week. So let's see.
Look at the top answer.
Hang on, here's the top answer. Dave, I think you should read the top answer.
The top answer is from It's Tomorrow Now. It simply has to be Shenmue.
The people have spoken.
People have, there's a good response. Shenmue was very influential to developers. This is someone else replying. It was much later that people actually started to say it was a good game. Maybe a bit of the Emperor's New Clothes there.
That's from Snoo74360. Thank you for that comment. Right. Next one is from Tech Made Easy UK. Says, hear me out. Wolfenstein 3D. Not because it doesn't deserve its rightful place as an amazing advancement in technology and essentially the granddaddy of the FPS game genre, but because it was successful. Its success was absolutely obliterated by Doom. Ask people what the first FPS game was, and the majority will point to Doom, which, while inaccurate, is culturally and debatably the right answer. Wolf 3D feels like a tech demo for the much more polished, advanced game that came later. That said, it's wonderful to have seen the franchise live on, but in my view, it remains in the shadow of the IPs that came after it in the form of Doom and Quake.
Of course, the very first one in the genre is 3D MIDI Maze on the Atari ST.
Oh, was it? That came before 3D Monster Maze, did it? I think when you look up what was the first FPS, it's something like 1974, isn't it? It goes way back.
I know, aye. Yeah, a bit dubious.
Yeah. Jason, what answer have you got?
Next up from Jeff Mendoza, he says, the various Disney games on 16-bit consoles. I'm picking them because they were generally good but not influential. The game mechanics used elements that had already been done better by the likes of Sonic, Mario, and Zelda. They were pretty playable and generally well made. They were not influential. I will take Jeff Mendoza's word for it.
When you think of something like The Lion King or Aladdin. Sonic has come before it. It's just kind of a bit, it's a nicely made thing. There's nice animation, but it's not doing anything noteworthy, is it?
There was one that came up on the Discord that I'm going to insert here, and it's Dizzy. And the idea is that Dizzy's a great game. I love Dizzy. And I said, I think Dizzy's a text adventure that you play with a joystick on a platformer. But I don't think Dizzy's got a legacy. I think you had Dizzy and you had a few knockoffs at the same time, but you don't had it. There was nothing that came after Dizzy in its legacy, if that makes sense.
Jason?
Yeah, one interesting answer on the thread was from Fultonbot, who says Mule. Now, then there's some arguments about whether the Atari 8-bit version was better or more influential, and that's a debate for another time. But Fultonbot goes on to say it might have had an influence outside computers and video games on board games like Settlers of Catan, but there's no direct evidence of that I could find. And I am a massive Mule fan, but I had to admit, when I looked at this, I can't think of, it has definitely influenced people like me who love the game, and it has definitely influenced the remakes and, kind of revivals, but I can't think of games that have done that same kind of thing with a competitive cooperative setup, or that have done real-time auctions or all those things that make Mule special. I can't think of other games that have done it, period, let alone ones that, you like to think of influential. You like to think of something that takes it, makes it better, becomes, exponentially more popular. I don't see where it's created that legacy, unfortunately.
An answer from 6502 Assembler I really like. Reversey from Windows 2.x, a game that was so great it got canned in favor of Minesweeper. Yeah,
Come on.
very noteworthy.
Come on.
Any other
Sybil66 says Jeff Crammon's The Sentinel. So ahead of its time, it never imitated or expanded upon either. The Sentinel was a strange game where it was you on this 3D map against the Sentinel, and you to absorb things and gain height to win the map. And it was a strange game that I can't think of anything that came from the Sentinel.
It inspired some embarrassing reviews out there. The infamous, "Oh, this game is so amazing, we can't even score it." Sure you can. Come on.
The Retro Don, and also there was one other I saw, Session Pristine, talk about movie or TV tie-ins. Session Pristine in particular talks about Airwolf on the ZX Spectrum, leaning hard on the popularity of the TV show, expecting a flight sim, and well, we got what we got, which was a strange.
Airwolf was rotten.
Yeah, it was a rotten maze game. It was very odd. There's so many answers. So please, I think this is probably the most engaged question of the week that we've had for a very long time. So please go and check it out on the subreddit. Lots of answers.
Yeah, and no one really is putting antagonistic answers. It's all thoughtful stuff that's been well thought out. So thank you so very much for putting the time and effort into this.
And that brings us on to this week's question of the week. We were talking about Demakes earlier, so let's go with that. What modern game would you like to see demade? What game? What platform? And why? Yeah, nice and simple. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
No,
quite succinct for us.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you again for joining us today, Jason. Thank you to everyone for listening. Check out the subreddit, reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro. If you love the show, go to patreon.com/This Week in Retro. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and tell all your friends about us. Tell your family about us. Tell your mum to subscribe to us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. We're waving.
Bye.
Bye.
Hope to see you again soon.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from the Retro Collective and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.